Hi guys, Frankie V from Frozen Sand with another episode of Working with Power Tools. And as usual, the preamble is these are just video blogs on the fly because I happen to have a microphone. I also happen to have some software, and I also have what's that thing called shadow play, which when I press a button, I can just shoot something out and toss it up on the YouTube. Uh, and about the same amount of time it actually takes to do the video blog. So as to ease of use, it's nothing kind of thing to do, just to keep people interested or let them know what's going on behind the scenes on an ongoing basis, or as just me rambling on about some cool stuff that may be of value to someone else. So in this case, one of the maps that is on the rack for conversion is Abby, and it's been a while since I've did anything on that as to its progression and what have you. So, it's a good subject to do an episode around. So, so these things are not really that difficult to do. As I explained here, it's a push a button, start talking kind of thing. The most difficult thing to come up with, though, is finding subjects of interest. What is something that we can throw out there as a visual or something that as content somebody would see as being of value to their own interest within our restricted inside the ropes kind of deal. The synergy behind Urban Terror seems to stay inside the Urban Terror community. So unless we start doing cute kitty cat videos, then the opportunity or the possibility that that kind of information will go viral is, well, none. Really, sorry to say. It's an interest type specific to our community. So this is what we're doing. We're going to be talking to our community member people, so to speak. In the meantime, if you do want to help out and you want to see more, and it's a 50-50 kind of thing. I'm gonna start linking these back to our forums or post these splashes, our blog posting I do within the forums until we can start getting our blog posts up and having a lot more profiles, up there in bright lights. But as usual, there's no point until you have a significant amount of content to say, hey, listen, check this out. Here's everything I want. We're putting a lot of time and effort into doing that. There's no point in doing that until you have the content that you can include as part of that type of let's say marketing kind of strategy kind of slash thing. So I thought I'd kind of point that out from the beginning that if you are interested in stuff, feel free to come into our forums and say, hey, listen, this is the kind of thing I'm interested in, and it gives us an opportunity to make a show around it kind of thing. So hopefully as we progress, these little bits and pieces of micro stuff, that content that's going on all over the place, can be consolidated into something that is a little bit more, let's say, has a little bit more production value, shall we say? Okay, so I'll leave that with you, and of course, as usual, we will expect some kind of feedback, let's say. Okay, so anyways, let's get on with the show and do our run through here as to Abby, as to thinking, and of course as a work in progress. So this is the upper courtyard. This is usually the spawn area where a blue team would spawn as part of a CTF type of that this map is usually configured for. And of course we've thrown up some boxes with paint on it to kind of make it look sexy, and added some trees. The lighting is kind of monochromatic right now because every time you add something, of course, then you have to redo the lighting functions as it starts to build up. So there's a lot of different types of variations and what have you. What's rather slick about this is really cool. This is a light and day blueprint system I just bought. I just saw it and I say, hey, that looks cool. Let's throw it in and see what happens. And it is actually an animated day and night lighting system feature to it that you can change it to the time of day. So if we just kind of scroll back and forth, you can see how quickly we can change to night and day. Weather conditions can also be simulated if we go ahead and just leave it over time, certainly within in this kind of play mode, you can see some subtle changes as to day and night as it progresses. And should I play around with that a little bit more? Maybe not. So you can change the timing, of course. So for testing purposes, we can set this up so it goes from night to day in a space of about 30 seconds if we wish. So as well as cloud conditions, is it overcast? Is it doing this and doing that? So as part of the layering process of the environment development as being component in nature, so these various different aspects of this environment can be changed at a whim. So this is certainly a significant difference between working with UDK, which had some level of degree of functionality as far as scripting goes, versus working in Radiant, where you want to do something cool, but the motivation to do that is not built into the design as being modular. So if we wanted to, for example, make this a snowy environment, or we want to have rain, we can add that as a blueprint or as a component feature, and then test it out, take a look at it, and say, nah, it doesn't work, pull it out, toss it away, and then try something else new. So this is to kind of protect whatever work is being done in the main persistent value. Then the idea, this is where the idea is thinking. For example, levels can be used to introduce various different elements that is, well, sandboxed. That's once again the cool thing about Unreal 4 is everything you can do as part of the process can be sandboxed and then later on bolted in as a component as part of the game actual. So if you look over to the left here, you can see we have a persistent level. That's where all the goodies are contained on. And then I have the Abbey, which is this guy over here. I kind of said, okay, that's going to be the Abbey. So you can turn that on and off and develop that as a subcomponent, as a modular that is introduced by the way of level streaming. So this could be either turned on or turned off or changed based on its streaming method. For example, blueprint or always loaded. So that allows us to create extremely highly detailed environments, but at the same time decrease the amount of memory footprint that is required for that element, so it has zero impact based on the player's perspective. So let's say, for example, Casa as a facade is about 19K at the most, so very, very, very low. So you could build, but the completed environment itself might be as high as, say, 100K. So what or even more than that. Complete map, Casa, well, go check the file size and you get a pretty good idea of how big an environment would be if you look at the whole thing in one big chunk. So instead of building a highly detailed environment in one big chunk, so the memory requirement shoots through the roof. Next thing you know, you have a 32 gig map as compared to, say, something that is a little bit more reasonable like 4 gigs. You can break things up into chunks so that the player is always playing within a memory footprint of, say, 4 gigabytes rather than the whole 30-shoot match of 32 gigabytes. So it is very, 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 very easy to optimize detail down to let's say the speed and performance requirements that we're all familiar with in the form of Urban Terror 4.2 under the Intech 3 engine. So as to impact wise, unlike in using Radiant or using Intech 3, you can pump up the visuals at the same time have the benefits of what the engine does behind the scene as to the needs of performance. So that's that's one of those things that has been kind of floating around within our community is performance, because, well, performance is everything. We're a run and gun shooter that painted boxes really don't have the same kind of requirements within that type of genre. But on the other side, to be able to attract new players to the game and what have you, sexy graphics sells. Sex sells, right? Sexy environment sells. So that's probably the only real motivator to be able to make things look a little bit more higher in detail. Use graphics to be able to to use that as part of the visual game synergy, where somebody looks at it and says, hey, that looks good, I'll give it a try. They give it a try, the game sucks, I'm not going to play it, kind of thing. So being a free game, of course, that is something of worth and value to kind of, take a look at it, test it. We are a love of the game, for the love of the game project. People who work on this game do not get paid, have actually no hope of whatsoever of getting paid based on the production of a free game. What happens down the road, who knows? But that's our focus right now, is to make the game and not worry about those other stuff like that involves things like revenue stream or what have you, which actually, for us would be more or less the touch of death kind of thing. So anyways, moving on and forward, hopefully, I hope that was of interest, some kind of interest. Okay, from an inspection standpoint, let's go ahead and just take a quick run around, and hopefully we can just kind of do some background chatter as to some of the things that are going on. Right now, it looks, everything kind of, as I mentioned, looks kind of monochromatic flat as far as visuals goes, but that's okay. That's, once again, modular design systems means we can deal with lighting and what have you as part of the iteration process. We don't have to worry about that it looks perfect now. Just get something in place that says, okay, this is a game element, and then worrying about polishing it up at a much later stage, which wasn't really ideal of course in Radiant, because you more or less had to do what you had to do then. Otherwise, by the time you get to the back end of things, you have basically a design that's collapsing in on itself with so many little problems that it's just, heck with it, toss it out and start over again. Okay, moving on and forward, and just kind of running through it. Most of the, let's say, required elements as to layout has been blocked in, so as we move, we can kind of move through the environment based on the Unreal 4 scaling aspect, which I'll talk about in just a second here. And that allows us to be, by practical examination or testing, can kind of weed out the small details that may or may not make a difference between this being a popular map or a complete failure. So one of the requirements, of course, of a first-person shooter is not hooking up on the walls and anything that is involved, and looking at various different assets or components that have been added to the game is a element. So we're running over here, we're into the bushes. Does the player being able to hide or clip into the bush? Bias favoriting, it's going to be to stick with the idea that to be able to clip through something as opposed to it being something that becomes an obstacle as to a real world equivalent. So we have some trees in here, sure, we have those as well. Through testing or of course through player feedback, we can see if this is going to be an issue or not. Is it in fact that as a visual component is pleasing and should be remain, and then and then just say that, okay, the heck with it, we'll just allow the player to clip through it if they want. Well, I'm kind of hooked in. So see, this is why we do playtesting. I'm actually hooked in. I cannot get out of this area here. So those are the kind of things that are a little bit more important as to the final release. Not so much that what you're looking at is actually going to be in the final release. You have to have something to fill the hole of space, and then you can evaluate it and say, no, that's not going to work. We need to do something different, and then you can move on from there. And then ultimately you have something that is comparable to what people are used to, but at the same time different. So that's unfortunately that's the nature of engine conversions. Okay, so one of the requirements, of course, is not hooking up on real-world objects. So if we running a wall, we just found a bug, right? So that was a clipping problem. The player probably got jammed between two clipping elements and got hooked up onto it. So you got to kind of run the wall, make sure that the player's not hooking into it. This area right here, this is a decision-making area. Okay, we can create an easement that forces the player through the opening, whether direction that he's running in, or is this an area that the player can use as a means of coverage. Now, obviously, Urban Terror not being a startup, it's more of a formula. You know, here's the list, a checklist, and you can check off the list based on what needs to be part of that formula, and not necessarily how it looks as to functions. So another consideration, of course, is because there's no need for visiting. If you're a mapper, you know what that means and what its requirements are to make sure you have a high performing map. There's no longer a requirement in Unreal 4 because the engine itself, when you compile the map, does all the visiting and what have you for you, based on, I guess, on much more bouncing stuff around raycasting and what have you. How that actually occurs. At the moment, I don't know how that occurs, but the one thing I do know is there's no need for visiting. So what that does is allows you to do is you can open up rooftops and still have the same amount of frame rate that you would have in a comparable Radiant / Urban Terror map, where rooftop movement or verticality of gameplay was limited by the fact that if you get to a certain point where you can see most of the map from a given point, your frame rates would more or less tank. You know, you're talking about going from like a good solid 120 down to like 60 or even less than that. So as to verticality and map design, it was more of a technical requirement than it was actually a let's say a artist intention, so to speak. You could not open up the roof because your FPS will tank, and of course people hate your map and they won't play it, so you don't go there, right? In Unreal 4, being up on top of the rooftop and seeing the entire playing field from a given point doesn't add any significant impact as to frame rates, all things being equal, let's say. This area in here has been is an area of hum and hawing, so it's had some work done on it, but not to completed form. So you can see I just plopped a tree into the courtyard here, just so I have a tree plopped into this area here to kind of fill it out a bit to get a better idea of how things are shaping up as far as perspective goes. So if you want to comment on this, I've been thinking about widening the area, scaling it up a bit, not so much as changing the layout, but to make it a little bit more comparable to the Abbey courtyard as to visualization. Once again, content's not an issue. It's not a performance problem as to maintaining the same performance curve as we're familiar with, of course, under Urban Terror / Id Tech 3. So it doesn't match. The two don't correlate. Let's say you can't take whatever's happening in as far as performance and apply that to Unreal 4 as a demand, because things have changed. So let's say the engine handles about I would say a good 90% of anything that would be considered a performance issue if you simply configure it as to the demands of and requirements as to that asset meeting the parameter requirements of the game engine. So if you say, okay, A needs to be optimized, has to be done this way so that the asset conforms to whatever A is asking for, then the output, of course, is the most maximized possibility as to the optimization of a given element. Now, where you see these kind of things show up in is, for example, which you have to kind of question is, for example, the ability to create foliage using a brush, but the foliage is contained within a bucket as an instance element within the environment. So obviously there's something going on behind the engine that says anything that's in this bucket needs to be optimized based on this requirement. So you can as long as you figure out and follow what the ABCs are, then your map will always perform at its highest performance envelope without having to be too overly concerned about optimization. So another area of interest here is, of course, trees. Like people want foliage, they want trees, they want they might want this, they might not want that. So this is something that once again, flexibility. It's such a delight as an artist to be able to just throw something into it without having to worry that you're going to break something on the back end of things. So in this case, we have lots of copies of this same tree in this area here, and these are instant copy, which means that the memory footprint, which is probably more critical than anything else, is how much memory are you using to do all this stuff. Taking into consideration that the majority of your clients will be, their maximum specification for their box is, maybe 8 gigabytes, versus you being able to produce environments in the 32 to 64 gigabyte region. So one of the ways to be able to decrease that memory footprint is through instant copying. So if you make one copy of one tree and you pull that off and you make a whole forest of that tree, the entire memory footprint that is involved in there, except of course for the visual rendering requirements, is equal to one tree. So that allows you to keep your memory footprint down low enough, so at least, regardless of whatever rendering means your client has, as far as performance requirements goes, is equal to 1. So it's 1 to 1, which is pretty cool. Another area of optimization is the use of texture atlas. Now that's one thing that I love texture atlases. That's one of those things that I would probably, if they meet a certain interest as to let's say as to usage, if you're trying to create a high-rise gleaming building environment and you have a texture atlas that has all gleaming and high-rise elements into it in a single 4096X package, then you then have the opportunity to be able to add a ton of different small elements connected to that texture atlas, which equals one draw call. So you can create, if you try, you can build a very elaborate environment with all the goods and goodies and what have you, all based off a single material. The output, it would be one draw call as to that material. So that's another way of being able to optimize, still maintaining high degree of performance versus the idea of being able to, let's say, create a pleasant-looking, sexy environment that people will buy. Once again, going back, people, sex sells. You have a sexy-looking game, people will buy it. It's that simple. A, B, C, right? It kind of reminds me of that South Park episode. What was it? Collect underwear, something, make profit kind of thing. So that's where we are right now. We're into the something. We've collected the underpants, and now we're into the something, and then we're going to worry about how to profit on it later. So here's another element of test. What's cool is to be able to apply texture to materials for optimizing up. So as part of the optimization process, you can create very low detail elements, and then of course scale your LOD system by the use of materials to scale it up to much more higher resolution type of the closer you get, the better the detail gets kind of approach. So this is actually a test patch. Let's say I've actually created using the garment maker in 3ds Max to create a surface that has enough detail that where the height map can extrude the geometry of the ground here. So there is rather distinct difference between what this would be used in normal maps versus a height map. Obviously, you cannot replace detail with materials. You can fake it, and you get a real good. You can get a really close facsimile, say that right, that looks the same on a flat surface, but nothing beats geometry as to being able to create detail into a surface area. So in this case, this piece of ground, if we go up, visibility. Okay, show only selected, and kind of having a brain fart right now. So okay, so here's that surface area in as in, let's say, in place geometry, and if we go to wireframe, boom, you can see there's a lot of detail in here. I had to this also is a surface area that has, of course, a tessellation applied to it. So we're talking about a horrendous amount of geometry being generated in a single point in this area. Now, as to is this or is this required? Then, of course, the answer to that is no. A simple material with a normal map would certainly be able to would cut the mustard, but at the same time, this is an opportunity to kind of test out the theory once we actually start getting the practical testing. So to kind of put it out on the out into the Ethernet or the urban terror environment. Let's see. I'm having that brain fart again. Show all actors. Okay. Oh, where did everything go? Did I actually? Let's hit play. Okay, there we go. Wireframe. Oh, heck with it. Silly me. Lit. Maybe if I hit focus. Okay, there we go. We are way, way, way out there somewhere. Okay, let's see if we can get back to where we were. It's probably had the sky dome selected or something. See, messing around, things happen. Okay, stick with me. I'll fix it. I'll fix it. I got it. Okay. That's like something in here. You can see there's obviously a lot of outline with different types of levels of density and in the wireframe mode. You can see that the Abbey has probably 4.2 grade geometry to it. Okay, let's stop playing around here. Get back on the show. Oh, come on. Yeah, it's the same problem with answering machines. You got a microphone in front of you. You got to talk to it, and of course, what happens. Okay, so boy, how far are we into this? I don't know. I really need to reset my clock here because it's still reading daylight saving time, etc., etc. And of course, my VCR. Yes, I still have VCRs flashing 12 noon. Where to go from here? Well, I think we covered most of what I would think is interesting stuff. The stuff that has kind of been building up over the last little while as to things that make you go, But we are certainly a long way off of actually having what we would I guess you would say, what is an what makes for an urban terror HD map? What is it that historically has been around for the last 15 years as to the requirements as to the players being able to move through the environment as a checklist of things that has to be done? Then no, we're not into that. We're not really into that type of framework right now. That's one of those. Once again, being a modular Star Trek technology, that's something that we can leave for days before release, that we can go through and run through and put in easements to make sure that players are not hooking up on collision mesh, and of course by that time we have hopefully tons of feedback from the alpha release. So boy, a lot, and of course there's a lot of things that I know but don't really know. So I think we'll start of throw those things back into the drawer, and then later on we'll do another a kind of a state of the union kind of address kind of thing, and maybe hopefully have a little bit more fun in the process. But in the meantime, feel free to jump in, and if there's some stupid silly thing that you want to see, I'm always up for pimping stuff out as to why I think this is a great game. Okay, anyways, enough is enough. I'll see you in the next one later.